Better Bros. Today we're bringing in Justin Belkin, founder of Financial Boss. He's seen every side of money. Morgan Stanley, Oxford MBA, fintech trenches, corporate strategy. Dude's all over the place. And now he's the guy who families call when they're done guessing and they need a plan. This episode hits where most men bleed: cash flow and clarity. We get into war chests and why 3 to 6 months buys you sleep. Compounding. For you and against you. When to kill debt before chasing market gains. How to use your 401k matches without starving your budget. Side hustles and add income without blowing up your marriage. Tithing. Conviction. It's all over the place. Justin's also a certified financial planner. He's got his MBA. He's a tax professional, obviously the founder and CEO of Financial Boss. Cool dude, awesome dad. So you're going to hear simple, immediate moves that you can make today and none of that guru nonsense that you're so used to. So if you're a man who wants strength across our 5 pillars, fitness, finance, family, friendship, and faith, just join the Brotherhood, man. www.menmadebetter.com. That's www.menmadebetter.com. One more time for the psychological purpose, www.menmadebetter.com. Come build with us, brother. Hold the line. Become better. What's up, everybody? Better Bros Podcast, Barret, Nobel, Don Hickman. We got a special guest, Justin Belkin of Financial Boss here. Justin, what's happening, man?
Thank you, Barret. Thank you, Don. Nice to be on the show with you guys. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, for those who are new for our second episode here, we're the Better Bros. We're based on 5 core pillars of finances, fitness, family, faith, and friendship. And today we're going to be talking with Justin, obviously, if you can't guess it, about finances.
Thanks for representing the brand.
Yeah, I was just telling Justin I'm slightly envious of this badass neon sign he's got here.
I might need me a neon better sign up behind me. That's what I might need.
That's right. You got to get it in the shape of the 50 cal too.
Yeah.
So, Justin, give us a little bit of a background or so. Tell us some Justin Belkin stories.
Well, where to start? Well, first, I love what you guys are doing with the 5Fs, and finance is definitely a core of that. And one reason why I got involved in financial planning and investment analysis is because even though money is not the most important thing, it does affect everything that's important to us. Right? It helps us to provide for our families and to also self-actualize and do the things that are important to us and to develop our own strengths and abilities so we can contribute better to our families, our friends, and society. So finances underpin all of that. So I would say that I started after college working at Morgan Stanley. So that's a well-known Wall Street, firm. And the focus there was always more on investments and gathering assets and servicing customers, but not really talking about the more holistic financial planning parts that I think are even more meaningful than investments. So did that for a while, went to business school, had an opportunity to go to school in England at Oxford, which for me was a big thing because I was, public school educated, right? So I went to public high school, went to my local state university. So for undergraduates, so after that and having the chance to go to Oxford, that was a great experience. The people I met and what I learned, and I think it helped me to get me where I am today. And then when I came back, I continued to work in financial services, but it was more like on the institutional side, working for a fintech called Second Market. And the interesting thing about Second Market was the CEO at the time was Barry Silver. And if anyone in your audience is Barret, I'm sure you're aware, Barry started the first Bitcoin trust called Grayscale. And it was kind of a second project that he launched after I left Second Market unfortunately, and which he wound up selling to NASDAQ private market. And so I continue to have an interest in crypto, uh, and Web3. So then the way I actually met Barret was after Second Market sold and I returned to work closer to home. I worked at Canon, which is a large camera and printer company headquartered in Japan, but with a local office here in New York. And I worked as a product manager and in corporate strategy. And that's where I teamed up with Barret, who's a software developer, and we worked on a project together. But I was always kind of missing the fulfillment and the intellectual challenge from helping people with their finances. So ultimately decided to launch Financial Boss, which is a registered investment advisor. And so now I get to return to do what I love and to help people to achieve their dreams so they don't have to really think about the money anymore. So it's a little bit of background. I'm happy to go more into any part of it that you find interesting or that your audience might be interested to know.
Love it. Yeah, I didn't even know when we first met that you were Oxford MBA. I thought that was pretty badass. It's just always, if I ever went to business school, Oxford was always at the top of my list. And I don't know if that's I don't know what it is. I don't have a good answer for that one, but
Well, to tie it into families, I was a little bit older, right? Like in America, normally you'd be like 24 years old and you go to business school. So you're 2 years out of undergrad, you have some work experience under your belt. But in Europe, it was older, like the average age was 28 or so. And so at the time I was 30. So I was about to propose to my wife, right? Who I'm now married to. And our anniversary is coming up actually. It'll be 15 years.
wow.
And I had to decide like, I'm 30 years old. I don't think I could do a 2-year full-time MBA. Too expensive, too much time, gets me out of the market from working. I was thinking about doing like an NYU part-time degree. That could be 3 years long. And then, maybe something happens. We have kids. I get distracted. I don't finish the degree. So one of the benefits of a European MBA was not only was my peer group closer to my age, but also is 1 year instead of 2. So, I could get back to life. And my wife is terrific. She is like, oh, you proposed to me and now you moved into England. Is he coming back? But I am a Leo. And although I'm not big into astrology, I do believe in, loyalty and strength and friendship. And so, I focused on my studies. I met new friends. My wife came over. I came back for holidays. The year went by before you knew it. And then we got married as soon as I got back. And then like a month after we got married, we found out we were pregnant with our first child. So it just really took off after that.
Quite the accelerated timeline.
Yep. But that's my speed. So
Yeah, I want to jump in right there because you said something that was important about going back to university or what have you. And that was that you need family support, right? The financial thing is huge. So tying this into the family thing, you need family support, whether you're going back to get new skills or, if you talk to your family and say, hey, we make X, I want to make X. We need to do this to get me there, because sometimes as men, we got to reinvent ourselves, right? That is not a solo decision. Right. Maybe if you're 18, early 20s, that's a solo decision. But that, after marriage and kids, that is not a solo decision. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. Like, if you're inadequate in your finances, this is a family matter. You need to talk to your family and say, hey, finances aren't on point where I'd like it. We need to we need to make a conscious decision as a family, and I need support on how we're going to move forward with this. Right. So that was kind of one of our first talking points is the family situation on this. I have notes. I'm going to go rogue a lot, but I have notes. And one of the notes is financial stress silently destroys confidence and marriages. Right. And another note is most men are providers with no plan. They can make the money, but don't manage it. So I thought that was an interesting segue into talking about how the finances affect the family.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Don, too, because one thing I always try to remind myself, and maybe I got this from my upbringing, and I try to share with my kids, is just to always come from a place of gratitude, to be grateful, even when things are down and you don't have so much, or even if things seem hopeless. There's always something to be grateful for. Someone's always in a tougher situation you are. And so along with being grateful means trying not to take people for granted. And it is important, so only even like everyone else, to remind myself to be grateful, but also not take my wife for granted. Because even though she might not have been too vocal, she implicitly supported me, right? By not giving me grief or not stressing me out or not like talking me out of doing it, realizing that she was making a sacrifice that was going to be good for all of us and our future family. And so it's important not to take people for granted, to acknowledge that and to be grateful, and not just to think it in your head, but to actually say it. I don't think enough people actually say it and tell people, because people aren't mind readers. So I learned communication is key to a successful relationship and marriage as well.
Yeah, and and as a man, that's taking the lead and saying that, okay, this might suck for a while, right? But I got to go back to school and I got to do this so that we can get here, and then managing that the entire way. That's our job, right? As a man, you don't just operate in silence and I got to do this thing and then you just leave it there. You know, revisit that, guide them, lead them. Hey, we're on the right path. We're doing this. I thank you for that support. Again, let's be gracious for what we got. We're trying to get more. And so yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. It is not a solo effort. And then something, I don't know, you said something earlier that sparked, I wrote a note down too. And it's got to do with thriving financially, and particularly the religious people, the Christians out there. There's nothing wrong with thriving financially. Oh, it's not money being the root of all evil. It's the love of money being the root of all evil. There's nothing wrong with having money, but um, the more money you make, the more you can give back to those who you love, those your charities. The more you can do, right? So I'm not saying everybody's got an obligation to go out there and stack as much cash as they have, but it is a true statement that the better you're doing financially, the better you can pay it forward to other people. And so, just sort of, since I'm all over the board from a Christian perspective, it's said that we don't need to be all concerned in stacking resources, all of these things that God will never, we won't be lacking for anything, right? But it is also true that, how do I want to say that? Rather than constantly praying for survival and asking God to provide whatever it is, the next need and the next need and the next need, he's not going to let you lack, but there's also no problem with getting ahead of it, right? And you can operate your family from a much better position with the confidence knowing that you're providing and where the next dollar is going to come from and these things. That gives you a lot more stability as a leader to um, know that and be able to bank on that. So just some things I want to drop from how that intersects with the faith perspective.
Yeah, and one thing that makes me think about too is just how, you can kind of tie money to values. And if you want to know what a person's values are, just follow the money. So we do a lot of emphasis on like budgeting and cash flow optimization of Financial Boss. That's one of our areas of specialty. And so we're able to get into the weeds and look at transaction history, and you could see what people are spending money on and what's important to them. And that's usually the catalyst for change. Because then once you show that to somebody, they're like, well, this isn't really what I stand for. These really aren't my values. And then that's the basis for the conversation for changing that spending, one little habit at a time. And then before you know it, you've reinvented yourself, and then you're bringing yourself closer to the mental picture of who you think you are and who you want to be. And just one other point to that, I have a client at Financial Boss, and she's very religious, and she tithes 10%. And sometimes it's difficult for me to see. Like, I respect it, I appreciate her, but I'm like, that's a huge percentage, and she does it pre-tax. So what her gross salary is 10%. So her net take home is, a little bit more than 10%. But we find a way to make that happen by cutting back in other areas so that she could fulfill that spiritual need she has to time 10%.
Yeah, there's an interesting podcast I listened to recently where they were discussing the whole 10% tithing, and they had an interesting point that I had never actually thought of because I just always associated it with monetary contributions. And I don't remember the podcast host or anything, but he mentioned that your 10% doesn't 100% have to be financial. You can go donate your time for the church as well, or you can go any number of things. It doesn't have to necessarily be financial. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I had always been brought up to donate 10% financially, like, whatever. My parents, I don't think, did gross. They did net, which makes more sense to me. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting point, is if you are struggling financially, then don't necessarily look at it as a 10% financial. Like, your time is much more valuable, in my opinion. So say you can go volunteer for a week or 2 weeks or every week. I don't know, whatever you want, but it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. And there was another point earlier that you had mentioned in relation to family. I don't have the statistics, but I do know that finances is really, really high up there on rates of divorce. And it ties in exactly with what you said, Justin, with the communication piece as well. Is um, if you're not able to communicate your needs and wants with your partner, specifically around finances, then they're either not going to be met. There's going to be that building resentment. You're like, well, she should be able to read between the lines. Like, well, no, that's not how the man leads the relationship. We need to lay these things out on the table and just have open and honest conversations with each other to completely avoid all of that financial pitfalls. That, like I said, I don't have the statistics, but I know finances is very high up there on reasons for divorce.
No, for sure. And I think, it's nice to have big, hairy, audacious goals like 10%, right? And as men, we're aggressive and we want to achieve it and get everything at once. But it's okay to start in smaller increments. I think the important thing is like forging new neural pathways and building small habits. So this isn't just about how much to donate, but even like for your 401k, right? If you work at a company that offers it, or you're contributing to your traditional IRA. Yeah, maybe the max is 7 or 8,000 and you want to put in that much. Or maybe your company matches up to 5%. But even if you can't meet that, just do 1%. You have a child, you want to put money in a 529 college plan, you're intimidated that how am I going to get $250,000 saved to go to college? I hardly have 25 bucks to throw at it. Throw the $25 at it. Just form that like pathway and then build on it. And the 25 becomes 50. And I promise when you look back, you'll just be happy that you started, and you'll be outperforming your peer group who's waiting for that moment to start because they think they have to reach a certain height before they could start. And I just say, like, start now, start small, and be committed and do it continuously.
I'll echo that too. Just because that's not just financially, that's anything. The weight loss, start small. Start making changes in your life. There is, I saw a quote the other day, something like, there is no ready is a myth. Ready is a decision, right? You can decide to start small on anything you want. I used to say it a lot, move the needle. Just move that needle a little bit. Doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to go from zero to your end state. You just that little bit, right? And then since it's a financial talk, we'd be remiss if we did not mention just the power of compounding, right? So, compounding interest, for anybody that doesn't know, you put a little bit in, and then that earns interest, and then you earn interest on the original amount plus that interest, and it just compounds over time. So the sooner you get in and you starting small, the more result you're going to see later on down the line. So just for anybody who doesn't know that powerful concept, you can look more into you want, but that's the high level view. But compounding interest is real.
Yeah, I remember my grandparents or my great grandparents would always send me financial books for birthday gifts when I was young. And I didn't really appreciate it until I was a little bit older. But I read them and I enjoyed them because I've always been into finances and math. But I remember being, I don't know, 7 to 10, somewhere in that range. And one of the books showed the hockey stick graph of compounding interest. And I'll never forget that. I mean, I started investing pretty early because I was introduced to that concept at such a young age, and it was just so funny. It was a Benjamin Franklin quote because he was pretty big on compounding interest, and I just remember seeing like, yeah, after 10 years, it's not nothing, but then another 10 years, it starts going, and then another 10, and you're to the moon. And compound interest is just so beautiful.
So compound interest too, we got to talk about that. Works the other way. That works for debt as well. You said hockey stick. I automatically went to like the U.S. government debt. That's what popped into my head. And I'm like, yeah, that works the other way too, right? Oh, you got a credit card with like 2% interest or whatever, and you're like, 2% is no big deal. Well, you keep adding to that principal amount, 2% becomes a very big deal, right? And then it never stays 2% either if you're into credit cards, and maybe you're not quite as literate financially as you should be, but it never stays 0%. It never stays 2%. It'll start there as an intro. So, if you don't know what your rates are on your cards and you use cards and you're not paying them off regularly, look at those rates. I imagine the sheer disgust and the
You're
interest
gonna be
charge,
upset.
that'll probably make you start a little bigger than small, right? You'll probably see that and be like, yeah, all right, I don't know that small steps are warranted here. We got to take some drastic action. So compound debt, that works the other way too.
It is okay to say to yourself, if the market's up 15%, but my credit card is charging me 20% annual interest, then I'm actually ahead of the game by paying off the 20% interest credit card than I am investing in the market,
That's
even
right.
though mentally we're going to have that FOMO, that fear of missing out. So you do want to make those smart decisions.
That's right. And if you don't understand that fully, you got to turn to somebody who does. If you don't get that, turn to Justin. Yeah, turn to Justin, turn to a bro. In the Better group, we talk about that stuff all the time. Turn to a bro that knows. Actually any of this. If you consider yourself financially illiterate, holler at somebody. So finance is one of those areas where what you don't know will absolutely hurt you, right? And you may not be aware of what you don't know. You don't know that you don't know, right? You might think, "Oh, I know some things about finances." Well, if you can't say you know all the things about finances, which a lot of us can't, but we're pretty, I consider myself pretty close. I'm sure you both consider yourself pretty close. But if you don't feel like you're well versed, you got some work to do. Dive in, figure some things out, look at your situations. Justin mentioned like the 529 plan, like things like this. If you hear people talk about these things, you don't know what they are. Stay curious, dig into them, look at them. I hear Barret all the time. I'm looking into the tax implications of this. If I don't know what that is, sometimes even if I don't think it's going to apply to me, look it up. Stay curious, guys. Figure this stuff out. It's just one of those things where, you're you're good at or good with the things that you're passionate about and interested in, there's no reason you can't make finance one of those things. Look, taking an interest in your finances ain't never going to hurt you, for crying out loud. But ignoring them, that can absolutely hurt you. So just for any bros watching this, take an interest in that stuff. And two, like if you don't know your financial situation intimately, yeah, maybe you let the wife handle it or whatever it is. I encourage you, get in there. Get in there, know it intimately, at least periodically. Okay. Barrett and I just had a conversation the other day about intentionality. And without intentionality, stuff begins to slip. You can watch it happen with it's two big areas: fitness, dude, faith. Without intentionality to faith, you can start slipping there and realize, oh, shoot, I haven't prayed in forever. I haven't opened the Bible in forever. Right. And then finances. Without ruthless intentionality in that and revisiting that, stuff will begin to, that much I can almost promise you, stuff will begin to slip without intention. So get in there, check it out.
Yeah, I like your focus on curiosity. Maybe to some extent, people are born with a disposition toward being more curious, but I definitely think you can also learn it too. And we just live in such an interesting world with so much to learn and so much to discover. It's almost like, how can you not be be curious. And so you
Yeah.
might not be an expert, but definitely do some research because when I think you and Barrett mentioned a little bit about tax too that you looked into. So in addition to being a certified financial planner at CFP, and we could talk about that later because I want to give some general guidance to the audience too, if they do seek out help, and even if it's not with Financial Boss, what they should look for, because there's a lot of people out there, that might be good at selling, but they're not good for what you want to achieve. But I'm also an enrolled agent. So like a CPA that allows me to work with the IRS and communicate with them directly for like tax resolution matters. And I also file tax returns. And so, sometimes I'll see with my tax clients, like little things they weren't aware of. They were laid off during the year and they had unemployment and they didn't have taxes withheld. So now they're already down for the year, right? Because they weren't making as much as they were because they were unemployed. And now they've realized they have a tax bill too, because you have to pay tax on unemployment. So if you don't have that withheld, or even maybe you sold some stocks because you have a Robinhood account, or you needed to take an early distribution from your 401k plan, right? Or the government will send like a 1099-R or a 1099-B form to you in January, February, March. And you have to, true up with that and reconcile it on your taxes. And if you didn't have taxes withheld, you might have a tax bill. And it's a really tough situation if you're already living paycheck to paycheck. And then you're like, wow, I owe a $3,000 penalty on that $30,000, 401k distribution I took. Because now where are you going to come up with that money? So those are like big dollars and big decisions that you're making during the year that could haunt you later on. So you may or may not need professional advice, but at least research it first. And you have Google, you have ChatGPT, so many ways to do that now.
You said something there, getting hit with unexpected expenses, right? That's a big one for me. And we talk about building up a war chest so that you can weather these, maybe a 3 to 6 month expense fund or whatever it is, so that you can weather these things. And so as the leader of your home, I want to say, you can't really put a price tag on your ability to sleep well at night. Okay. So when you have that war chest built up, when you've got 3 to 6 months expenses, and you just know that if something should come up, tax bill, automobile repair, home repair, children's medical expense, or, whatever it is, when you can cover something that comes up unexpectedly, the amount of stress that relieves and your ability to sleep well at night and not have to worry, you can't put a price tag on that. So, to anybody listening, if you don't have that war chest built up, it seems cliche to mention that, but a lot of people don't, especially in a inflationary environment where costs are constantly rising. Both parents got to work anymore just to make ends meet. It's hard. It's hard to build up a war chest. I'm going to go back to what Justin said on starting small. Start small if you can't do that. But that war chest, that is fundamental advice. Get that built up as soon as possible.
I agree with the 3 to 6 months. And if you have like access to credit, maybe 3 months is enough because then the additional difference you can offset, even though you don't want to use credit if you don't have to. So 3 to 6 months is the goal. When you're living in high cost states, New York, California, 6 months, a family of four, your monthly expenses could be 8 grand, 6 grand, 8 grand. How's someone going to come up with $50,000 in a war chest when they're living paycheck to paycheck? It's a very sad situation, but a lot of people find themselves that way. And so we shouldn't feel shame in that either, because many more people are suffering from that than we talk about. But then with my clients, I even say anything, because like 2/3 of Americans can't come up with $1,000 cash if they have to like replace all four tires on their car, right? Or when it pass inspection, like something like that. So even start like 1,000, then start $5,000, and celebrate those as wins. Don't beat yourself over the head. I need a 50,000 war chest and I can't even save 5 grand. Just celebrate it. Do 1,000, do 5,000, do 10,000. You'll get there. You need that dopamine hit of rewarding yourself so you can continue to have it. of putting away.
Yeah, and then when you start small, I don't care if it's $1, $10, whatever it is, that consistency, that builds a discipline, right? Okay, even if it's $1, you put it over here and you said you wouldn't draw from it, right? Every day that goes by that you're not drawing from it, you're building that discipline of setting money aside and not having the mentality of, oh, I can just pull that anytime I need. No, 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 that's not the thing. So that's sort of a just I don't know, it's like a low hanging fruit or like simple reward that maybe you don't think of. You don't think that you're going to see that and that's going to provide you encouragement to keep doing what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, you had an interesting word that you used there, Justin. You said the shame around your finances, and I've always I've always struggled with that. Not me personally having the shame, but the ability to be able to speak with friends or colleagues or anything. There's like a weird taboo. Again, I don't know if it's the American culture or what, but everyone, I think I mentioned this on the first one, or I don't know, I say it a lot, but there's a weird taboo with speaking about finances, and people put a little bit too much self-worth, in my opinion, into their salary or their job title or something. So it's always been intriguing to me when I'm very open, and I'll always talk to anyone who's willing about financial stuff. And this is what I have saved in my savings account. This is what I have in my investment accounts. These are my strategies. These are the things that I do. And I always find so much resistance about that, even with salaries at jobs and stuff. I had a couple people tell me that that was illegal, and I was like, well, it's actually not. Since like the 1930s, they passed a law where employees are able to openly discuss salaries without repercussions. So it's either, I don't know if it's just ignorance, or like I said, I think a lot of people put a little bit too much value on themselves based on their earnings.
I want to jump in there. And so one of the reasons I think that is because it's quantifiable. It's a number, right? It's a number that you can compare to other people. Whereas like how well you're leading your family or, how much time you're spending with God or your presence with your kids, those aren't numbers. You can't quantify those. And so as men, we like stuff we can measure, right? And so, and that's the same way your boss can give you a review at work and say, you're excelling here, 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 here you suck, and here's your 3% bonus or whatever it is. Those are all measurable, right? But when it comes to family, I don't know. That's why we've got the Brotherhood. So we talk about, we review weekly how we're doing on the family front, and without reflection, you may go 6 months, a year. Hell, you may never think about how you're doing with the family. So that's one thing we encourage in the Brotherhood is, hey, let's take a minute. Let's check on everybody. How's everybody doing here? Right. Like, and I myself, I like to use a 1 through 10 scale because we like to quantify things as men. So, hey, give your family, the family category 1 through 10, how you doing? And really makes you think like, dude, if you come up with a 3, you're like, oh crap, I got work to do. And I did not know I had work to do, never would have thought of even thinking of this without a prompt from a bro like, hey, let's all take a minute and reflect on this. So that's the power of brotherhood. That's just something we keep each other in check on that. And then you said something else. You said something about ignorance in there. And it was a point I wanted to address to something Justin said earlier, but it's so easy to be ignorant. It is so easy to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to not, I'm afraid of what I'll see with the finances and I don't want to own that. So I'm just not going to look at it. That's easy. That's the comfortable way out. Right. But, that's not what we do at Better. At Better, we embrace the discomfort and we want the dumpster fire. We don't want the highlight reel. We want the dumpster fire, right? We embrace the dumpster fire. Go looking, run towards the dumpster fire.
I always loved reading as a kid, and now even as an adult, I volunteer at my local library board. And so I would read a lot of nonfiction, and I'd read a lot of business and personal finance. And they have like the godfather of management consulting was this guy named Peter Drucker. And he wrote a lot of books. So I read some of them. And he's often quoted. And he had this one quote where, if you can't measure it, then you can't manage it. Right.
That's
So
right.
more to your point, if you can't quantify it, how do you know, are you doing better or are you doing worse? Are you overperforming, underperforming?
That's right, and that's what we do in the group every Sunday. I tell the guys, "Hey, let's take a look. Let's look back at your week. How we doing in these areas, right?" And so that's, the group named Better. That's how we continue to get better, is weekly reflection on how the last week went and quantifiable scores, and so we can course correct where we need to before we realized, oh gosh, how long has this been bad? Because dude, look, guys will be in bad shape for 6+ months, whatever, without even realizing they're in bad shape,
Mhm.
right? Because you get so thick into the day to day, like, on the day to day that you can't breathe, but you don't step back and say, oh gosh, it's been X number of days since I couldn't breathe. Something needs to change. Because any day we could wake up and have a hard day and can't breathe. We're just struggling, right? But when it takes conscious reflection to look back and be like, oh gosh, it's been a pretty big string of days. Something's got to change. Maybe I need to reach out to a bro. So yeah, I do like the quantifying thing. I like pinging guys, reminding guys of that reflection, to manage those 5 pillars.
Yeah, and one thing that I like in particular around the reflection on the 5 is that we kind of have like an exponential jump for it. So obviously we do the daily, we do the weekly, and then every month we set goals that we're trying to hit. So it kind of we're able to quantify it that way as well and really narrow in. I don't think we've done yearly goals yet. Maybe that's the next step, but probably not worth the time. But it's nice to be able to say, all right, I want to do this month. And then every week we reflect back on it. Like, did I move towards that goal, or did I detract from it in any way, and course correct based on that?
And so what happens is, once you put it in writing, that becomes more final and your bros see it to hold you accountable. Any one of us, any day, can have this thought, shower thought, tractor thought, whatever it is. Oh, I should be doing this, right? But once you write that down and you told your bros that you're going to do it, now there's accountability involved with that. How many people think during any course of any day, I should be doing this? And then something happens, the kids got home, you're throwing baseball, whatever. There goes that idea. It's just gone. You revisit that again in like a month or something like that and realize, oh, shoot, I had that idea and took 0 action, right? And then it just happens again for a whole nother month. And then, you fast forward a year, nothing happened. You did nothing. But you start writing that down, you got to own that. That's the power. And then look back at it weekly or monthly and be like, oh, shoot, I did or I did not move the needle on that. And then we figure out why.
In terms of getting started, I'm a big believer in goal setting. I would just open up on my computer like a very simple notepad, right? Nothing too fancy. And I would write 2025. And, I've been doing this for over a decade. And then I would list out all the things I wanted to accomplish, get my certified financial planner status, start my financial boss company. And then there's so many tasks associated with that. And the more specific you are, the more likely you are to achieve it. You have to incorporate, form an LLC. You have to get a federal tax ID number. You have to open up a business bank account. You need to buy, liability insurance. You need to build a website, and it could become overwhelming. But if you don't do that and it remains too nebulous, you're never gonna chip away at it and achieve that goal. And I might have 10 goals per year. And then sometimes I'd look at it and I'd even say a feat oh, this year's theme was level up my credentials, right? Next year's theme is develop, family or something. And sometimes I might only achieve 7 of them. And then the 3 I didn't achieve just roll over to the next year. So I had to give myself a little grace, right? That I wasn't going to accomplish everything. But I always believed in writing it down, being as specific as possible. And at least that increases the likelihood that you'll achieve most of what you set out for yourself.
Yeah, right on. I wanted to touch too real quick. We talked about starting small, but there's a point when you have to realize when that small is not going to add up in time. So there's a point you got to get to when you realize that I can't necessarily save my way there. I'm not making enough, right? So there's a point that you got to realize that you can no longer take from this frivolous expense and put it in savings. You just need to make right? So I'm kind of steering this a little bit towards like side hustles and stuff, but you got to be real with yourself too. You can start small, but you got to be real with yourself and look down the line and be like, okay, $1 a week just ain't going to cut it, right? But I can no longer pull from this, the fast food bucket or the coffee bucket. I can't pull from those anymore. I got to just make more. So we can steer that. Justin, do you have anything you want to say about side hustles or any
Yeah.
warnings or
Don,
encouragement?
I hear you say that, Don, and I agree 100%. Once you've taken some time out, a quiet place where you could think about where am I now? Where do I want to be? How do I envision myself? What do I want for my family? And then try to tie a dollar to that. You very well may come to the realization, you probably will, that you just mentioned, which you're like, my 9 to 5 job is not going to get me here. I don't care if I'm a superstar employee, there's a limit or there's a cap. And so I think that in this day and age, it's almost inevitable that if you want to achieve those goals realistically, you would have to have some kind of side hustle. And, you know, what's the Japanese term like ikugai, where what you do has to be the confluence of a few different factors, like what you're good at, what people are willing to pay you for, and what you enjoy doing. And sometimes, if you could do that kind of analysis, like maybe you like to cook on the side. So your side hustle is creating side prep meals that you sell and distribute to your community or your neighborhood, right? Whatever it is. Um, I'm getting into beekeeping, right? Just as I'm into that, and I joined my local beekeeper club, and next season I hope to have my first hive. But maybe it's selling honey, right? Honey goes for like $20 a barrel, a jar. It's crazy. And so maybe for your side hustle, it doesn't have to be what you think other people think your side hustle should be. I would kind of focus on, what do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? What are people willing to pay for? And then what has like low setup costs, right? Because it's a new skill set that you have to learn, essentially being an entrepreneur. So, maybe you don't want to risk a lot of your capital, right? So that's kind of how I would approach it. But I almost feel like, if you're an ambitious person that has goals for yourself and your family, how can you not explore side hustle opportunities?
And that's one of the beautiful things with the technology that's afforded to us these days is there are almost an endless supply of free resources or free software that you can use, like Canva. You want to make some pictures or flyers for your company, Canva's free. You want to release videos, I mean, YouTube's free. You get on social media, that's a gigantic worldwide audience you would have never been able to reach decades before. That's free. There's an endless amount of free resources on all of the things that I just mentioned. So, I mean, couple all that with AI, I don't think there's any reason why, even if you're not doing it to be entrepreneurial, like I started an egg stand this year. We just did it because we had chickens and we liked that. So I was like, hey, let's sell some eggs out front. The things sell out every time I put eggs out there. I didn't initially go after that as a side hustle, but it's a little spending change for the girls, really, and it's fun. The girls like collecting the eggs. We get to know the local community because people stop by and chat with us. Be like, hey, what's this weird thing you built in your front yard? And they're like, well, I mean, if you read the sign, it says fresh eggs.
Who gets the job of stamping it with the Nobel family farm?
I typically do that because I have the steadier hand. We had the little one try.
Uh, one thing I was going to say in terms of side hustles, and Barrett, you touched on it. Be aware of overhead and startup costs. If you want to make a side hustle, like you said, Canva or Coaching Biz or whatever the heck, that's like almost free. That's almost nothing. Feel free to just venture into that whenever you want. Mind your family time, right? That's going to be a family support thing. Let them know you're into that because that's going to take time away from that family. You don't want them resenting you for that. But the bigger point is, I've seen, there are certain people you'll hear about where you're like, oh, they just quit their 9 to 5 and went all in. That may work for a select few individuals. I can just about promise you that's probably not the norm. Okay, so dabble with the egg stand. Dabble with the Canva or whatever it is. If you can dabble for cheap, go and do that. Right? Don't if your 9 to 5 is paying the bills. Don't be like, well, I'm not happy. I don't feel fulfilled at what I'm doing. Pay the darn bills first, work on fulfillment later. I do not advise anybody to just quit what you're doing and go all in. You've got a responsibility to provide for that family. Do that strategically, tactfully. Um, at the Better Brotherhood, I always say we're a soundboard for guys. Talk to a bro. Say, hey, I'm thinking about doing. That's it. I've had it. I want to quit my 9 to 5, and I want to do underwater basket weaving. That's just what I want to do. I have to do this, right? And a bro can be like, all right, just pump the brakes. You need to stop. Okay. So, the power of having bros. I mean, I've seen some rash decisions made by people I know in my life, and having some bros as a soundboard is not a bad idea, right?
And if I could offer just some more personal experience on that, um, apprenticeship, mastering your craft are also very important. And even maybe as you're pursuing your side hustles. So, for example, at Financial Boss, I always did tax planning, right? But I didn't necessarily do tax preparation. But there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of times you'll have certified financial planners that get into tax prep. But I didn't think it would be prudent just to jump into it. I mean, you certainly could, and you could certainly take some courses and learn it. But what I wound up doing was I worked part time for one of those big tax, retail stores that you'll see on Main Street. And I did a full season there, filed over 200 returns. And so a few things happened. Like, one, I saw, did I actually enjoy doing it? Because maybe you don't like selling eggs on the street or selling jars of honey, right? Or from the catering service. So by working part time for someone else, almost under an apprenticeship, you see if you like it, and then also you see if you're good at it, right? So I would have like customers, leave comments where I knew I was doing a good job, and then I was saying to myself, this is something I like and I'm good at. I'm now willing to take it a step further. So now, if there was some small investment of capital, at least I felt more confident that it wasn't just, a random bet, but there was some data behind it that said to me, maybe this will lead somewhere. So I think it's okay to try to do an apprenticeship or dip your toe in it to see if it's for you before you go full hog into it.
Right. And you said something too about mastering your craft. And this is something, if you follow me on social media, I'm all about operating with excellence in everything that you do. Um, I've gotten two very lucrative opportunities in my life where just by doing a job I wasn't thrilled with excellence, somebody on the outside noticed that and it led to a much higher paying opportunity. So my advice is to operate with excellence in everything that you do because you never know who's watching, right? And then one thing I wanted to say too about like maybe switching jobs or reinventing yourself, the older we get, the harder it is to leave our comfort zone of that current job. Even if it's not providing well, it's known. It's a known versus an unknown of a new job, new environment. But one thing I want to say is keep in mind that you may if you're watching this and you hate your job and you're not fulfilled by your job, keep in mind too that maybe it's not the job you hate, maybe it's the people that you work with, and that can easily get convoluted and you not be able to separate the two. If it's just the environment and people you work with but you don't mind what you're doing, maybe you need to go somewhere else and do the same thing, or maybe you need to branch out. Maybe you're in some sort of banking, and I don't know, let's just for simplicity's sake, let's say you're doing commercial lending. Maybe you need to go do personal lending or whatever it is. Or maybe you need to take the next course to look at management of this rather than being on the ground doing it. So just keep in mind there's options out there, right?
At a high level, I remember hearing, in a job, you should either be earning or learning. And if you're doing both,
Yes.
that's great.
Yeah.
And I've sometimes had to make those decisions where, well, I did this to learn because I wasn't earning, But honestly, I think I absorbed everything I can. That's sometimes a good point to maybe consider moving on and considering new challenges. Either be
Yeah,
earning or learning, preferably
it,
both.
it kind of goes right back to staying curious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Keep on learning, don't stop. Providing value. If the more valuable you become as a man, the more skill sets you have, the more you learn. Obviously, the more your earning potential goes up. So the second you stop being curious and learning, you're cutting yourself off at the knees in terms of value and earnings potential.
hmm
That's it.
That's right. I've always heard that if your primary objective is to make money, you're not going to. If your primary objective is to serve, then you're creating value in the world, and then the money finds you because the money rewards value. But you're doing it to share your gifts and to bring value, not to make money. That's just the secondary consequence of it. I think that's a good mindset to adopt. And I think it's true.
Yeah, and also be aware of the I don't want to call 'em multi-level marketing, but there's scams out there. A lot of people, their first thought is, I'm unhappy with my job, I don't make enough. What's the easiest thing I can go and do? And so they're scrolling to Facebook and there's, hey, become a neuroscience coach in 7 days or whatever the heck it is. Just watch out for that stuff. I mean, it comes down to the basics of if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Use your God-given.
Yep, I tell my kids that all the time. I start those lessons now when they're scrolling on social media. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is not true.
Especially on social media.
Yeah.
Well, I know you got a hard stop here, so we can go ahead and wrap it on up. But Justin, where can people find you? Give us the financial boss sales pitch here.
Oh, thank you. And I'll leave you with some parting advice too, or
Perfect.
for your audience, because sometimes I think about, what can I share that are immediate steps that your audience can take right away, that are simple and they can be executed right away. So maybe if I think of like my top two or three, one would be understand how much money you have coming in, after tax that hits your bank account and how much money is going out. You just want to create a baseline and understanding a measurement where, okay, I have $500 extra each month. Because then you build on that and you say, well, some of that's going to go toward my war chest. Some of that is going to, my kids' sports club, right? But until you actually know what that number is, how can you, make more important decisions and fulfill some of your bigger goals? A second thing would be if you work for an employer and they offer a 401k. Not everyone matches, but if they do match, it is free money, right? The market could go up, the market could go down. Now, there often are vesting schedules, like you have to work there at least for a year and then you only get X amount, or you have to wait 2 years before it's fully vested. That's for the employer contributions. Whatever you contribute is your money. And so, like, if your firm matches 5%, try to put 5% in. So you're getting everything that they're possibly getting. Do the best you can. You don't have to put 12% of your paycheck into your retirement, but at least try to match what the company will do. So you're not leaving money on the table. And then I guess the third thing would be, yeah, stay curious and continue to increase your financial IQ and educate yourself. And investments is just one part of it, right? I think goal setting and also, um, is very important. So if you would like to reach me, you can go to financialboss.com, or you can also look for me on YouTube, where I'm creating content to help improve your financial IQ, and that's at Justin Belkin. And it was a pleasure talking with you, Don and Barrett. Thank you for having me. I wish the best to your audience, and I hope you found this helpful today.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.